Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are attempting to solve what is, well, arguably the most profound botanical mystery in the history of religion. We are diving into the lost identity of Soma.
And this is really more than just history, isn't it? It's like the spiritual bedrock of a major civilization. When the Aryans, these dynamic Indo-European people, moved into the Indus Valley maybe 4,000 years ago, they brought this whole religious culture with them.
Right, and it was centered entirely on this one thing, Soma, which was, bizarrely, a god, a plant, and the juice from that plant all at once.
Exactly. And you have to grasp how unique Soma was. It's really the only plant we know of that was ever fully deified by humans.
Yeah, it wasn't just an offering. The plant was the god. And the hymns about it, I mean, they're preserved in the Veda, thousands of verses.
And they're not just hymns, are they? They're described as having this ecstatic, almost delirious quality, a kind of spiritual fervor.
Not like rowdy drinking songs, definitely not. These are songs of, like, holy rapture, clearly inspired by some kind of potent substance.
But then, somewhere over the last, 25 centuries, the real plant just vanished. People started using substitutes, and it left this massive hole in Vedic studies. What was this stuff?
So our mission today is to dig into what's probably the most daring and I think most thoroughly researched hypothesis out there. Came from a really unlikely scholar, actually, a retired banker, R. Gordon Wasson, who was also a mycologist.
Right, Wasson.
Mm-hmm.
He basically ignored centuries of later commentary, all the confusing stuff, and went straight back to the source, to the Rig Veda itself.
He argued the answer was there all along, kind of hidden in plain sight within the poetry.
And his candidate, Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric mushroom.
That striking red mushroom with the white spots. The one you see in illustrations.
That's the one, common across northern Eurasia. And our dive today, well, we're going to lay out why Wasson believed this mushroom is the only candidate that fits every single clue in the Veda.
Okay, so let's set some ground rules first. Before we say what Soma was, we need to be clear about what it definitely was not.
Good starting point. And the first thing to rule out is any kind of alcoholic drink. The Aryans had alcohol, they called it Syrah.
But they didn't exactly approve of it, did they? Religiously, socially?
No, it was looked down upon. But more importantly, the actual rules for the Soma ritual, they basically make fermentation impossible.
Ah, the timing issue.
Yeah.
The ritual demanded they pound the plant, get the juice, and drink it immediately.
Immediately. Sometimes 3 times in a single day. Think about that.
Yeah, you can't ferment anything potent that quickly.
Yeah.
Not even in a warm climate like the Indus Valley.
Exactly. You'd just get, slightly sugary plant juice, maybe mildly active at best, certainly not enough to cause divine ecstasy described in the hymns. So that immediate consumption requirement, it just wipes out all the traditional alcohol candidates.
Okay, so no booze. What about other ideas people have thrown around? Like rhubarb or cannabis?
Yeah, those came up, but mostly from people relying on later, less reliable sources or just sort of ignoring the poetry. Rhubarb was suggested, I think, by Sir Aurel Stein. But Wasson just shreds that idea. He points out, the adjectives they use for Soma: resplendent, born of thunder, immortal principle. Apply that to rhubarb juice. It's just, it's ridiculous.
Fair enough. And cannabis or bhang. That seems more plausible psychoactively.
Psychoactive, yes. But it fails the botanical test in the Veda. The Rig Veda insists Soma came from the high mountains.
And hemp doesn't really grow way up high like that.
Not typically. It prefers lower elevations. And crucially, with cannabis, the active stuff is in the resin, the leaves, not the woody stalks.
Yeah.
But the Soma ritual. It's all about pounding the stalk or the shoot. That's the focus.
Okay, which leads us to maybe the most compelling negative evidence. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The silence. The things the Veda doesn't say.
Precisely. We have thousands of verses on how to prepare it, what it does to you, but a complete absence of certain words.
Like what?
No mention of roots, no leaves, no blossoms, no seeds. For a plant they worshipped in such detail, that's incredibly strange if it was a typical plant.
It's like they're deliberately avoiding describing standard plant parts because they weren't there.
That's the leap Wasson makes. What kind of plant lacks chlorophyll, lacks leaves, lacks roots in the usual sense? A fungus. And also, there's zero mention of cultivation, ever, which fits the fly agaric famously difficult, maybe impossible, to cultivate deliberately. It needs its specific natural setup.
Okay, so the lack of plant parts points to something unusual, like a mushroom. And the lack of cultivation fits, too. Let's move to theme 2, then. where Soma actually grew, because the location seems just as important.
Oh, absolutely. The Rig Veda is crystal clear on this. Soma comes from the mountains, often the tops of the mountains.
And for the Aryans in the Indus Valley, mountains meant the Hindu Kush, maybe the Himalayas, high-altitude stuff.
Yeah, we're talking 8,000 to 16,000 feet, roughly, that kind of elevation.
So why is that specific altitude range so critical for the phlagaric theory? Doesn't it grow elsewhere?
It does grow elsewhere, but in that latitude, in the region the Aryans inhabited, it has a specific requirement. It needs what's called a mycorrhizal relationship.
Well, what now, Mycorrhizal?
Mycorrhizal. Think of it like a mandatory partnership. The fungus, the Amanita, has to connect its underground network, its mycelium, directly to the roots of specific trees.
Okay.
And in that part of the world, at that latitude, the only trees it partners with like that are birch and conifers. And where do those trees grow?
At those high altitudes, 8,000 feet plus.
Exactly. So the Veda demanding a mountain origin isn't just poetic license. It's a precise ecological requirement that fits the fly agaric perfectly for that region. It narrows the field dramatically.
That's a powerful connection.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And structurally, you mentioned the stalk they pounded.
Right. No leaves, no roots, so what are they pounding? The Vedic word is anyu. It means stalk or shoot. Mycologists call the stem of a mushroom the stipe. It's that fleshy, non-leafy stalk. That's exactly what you'd crush to get juice. It fits.
And the logistics. The Aryans lived down in the valleys, mostly. They didn't control those high mountain forests.
No, and the Rig Veda actually mentions this. There are references to a ceremonial purchase of Soma, buying the sacred plant from mountain dwellers, maybe the Dacius, who came down from the heights.
And they paid a high price, didn't they? A cow of a specific color, I think.
Yes, which signals incredible value. And here's another fascinating parallel. Ethnographic reports from Siberia about the use of fly agaric there.
What do they say?
Accounts mention tribesmen trading sometimes a whole reindeer for just one good mushroom. That high value, needing to trade with others for a scarce wild resource, it mirrors the Vedic situation remarkably well.
Okay, the habitat fits, the structure fits, even the procurement method seems to line up with Siberian parallels for the fly agaric. Now let's get to what Wasson considered maybe the knockout blow. Theme 3, the idea of the inebriant having two forms.
Yes, this is chemically unique to Amanita muscaria among psychoactive plants. It's intoxicating in two distinct forms.
How does that work?
Okay, so the mushroom itself contains compounds, primarily ibotenic acid. It's psychoactive, but it can also cause some unpleasant side effects like nausea.
Right.
But when a person eats it, their body metabolizes the ibotenic acid into a different compound called mucimol. And this mucimol is then excreted in the urine.
Wait, the urine?
Yes. And here's the kicker. The mucimol in the urine is still highly psychoactive, possibly even more psychoactive and cleaner, with fewer side effects than the original mushroom.
So the body acts like a filter, converting the compound, and the urine becomes the second potent form of the drug.
Precisely. The body does the chemical conversion, and this metabolic pathway, producing a still active urine metabolite, is unique. No other major psychoactive plant does this.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's unusual. But does the Rig Veda actually talk about two forms of Soma?
Explicitly, there are passages like IX.66.2 where the text uses the grammatical dual number when referring to Soma. It talks about Soma in two forms.
How did traditional commentators explain that?
Well, they were clearly puzzled, having lost the plant's identity. They usually suggested it meant raw Soma juice versus Soma juice mixed with milk or curds.
But that doesn't really make sense, does it? If they were already mixing it routinely, that wouldn't be two fundamental forms of the substance itself.
Exactly. That explanation feels weak. But if you bring in the fly agaric model with the mushroom and the psychoactive urine, suddenly the two forms make perfect sense. And the Siberian shamanic practices involving urine recycling provide a direct cultural parallel.
Okay, this is wild. But if this practice, this urine consumption, was happening, surely there'd be some hint in the text, even if it's obscure. Relying on one weird line sounds risky.
It does, but it's the nature of the line and its context. It's not just any line. It's Rig Veda IX.74.4 near the end in a moment of ritual intensity.
What does it say?
After describing the gods, impersonated by priests, drinking Soma, the verse concludes quite directly, "The swollen men piss the flowing Soma."
The swollen men piss the flowing Soma.
Wow, that's graphic. It is, and the swollen men are identified as the officiating priests, the ones charged with the office who had just consumed the Soma. Some scholars tried to dismiss it as just a rain metaphor, clouds urinating rain.
But that seems like a stretch given the immediate ritual context of priests drinking.
It's a huge stretch, yes, especially when the priests are literally acting as gods who have just drunk. The direct interpretation fits the Amanita model perfectly. It explains the two forms and provides textual evidence for the second form's consumption.
Is there any corroborating evidence?
Yeah.
Maybe from related traditions?
There is. In the Avesta, the sacred text of Zoroastrianism, which shares roots with Vedic religion, they had Haoma, the equivalent of Soma.
Okay.
And there's a passage, Yasna 48.20, where the prophet Zoroaster seems to be condemning or excoriating the practice of priests consuming urine as part of the Haoma ritual.
So the practice was known, and maybe even controversial, in the wider Indo-Iranian world.
It seems so. That Avestan reference really strengthens the case for the literal reading of the Vedic verse. It's like the final piece of the puzzle for the two firms' argument. No other candidate plant explains the specific, bizarre detail confirmed in two related traditions.
Okay, the urine evidence is something else. Let's shift to theme 4, the appearance. Do the poetic descriptions actually match the look of a fly agaric?
They really do remarkably well. Let's start with the main color word used for Soma, hari.
Hari, what does that mean exactly?
It's not just a simple color like red or yellow. It implies brilliance, dazzling radiance, something fiery. It covers a range from bright, flaming red to a sort of tawny yellow or gold.
And how does that fit the mushroom?
Perfectly. You've got the brilliant, almost unnaturally scarlet red cap of the mushroom itself, and when you crush that mushroom, the juice extracted often has a distinct tawny yellowish hue. Hari captures both aspects.
They also compare Soma constantly to the sun, right?
Yeah,
And to Agni, the god of fire.
Yes, a shining disk, like the sun, sharing brilliance with lightning, being born of thunder.
Born of thunder.
Which fits that ancient worldwide folk association of mushrooms suddenly appearing after thunderstorms. And that bright red cap, you can imagine seeing it glowing on the forest floor. It's easy to see why they'd link it to fire and the sun's disk.
There are some stranger physical metaphors too, aren't there? Like Soma being a bull and having an udder.
Yes. The bull clearly symbolizes strength, potency, that kinetic energy they felt. But the udder reference, IV.23.1, think about the shape of a mature Amanita cap.
Okay, it's rounded, swollen.
Exactly. A large, swollen, rounded hemisphere sitting on top of the thick stipe or bull's neck. The udder metaphor is a surprisingly accurate visual description of that shape. Very odd for a normal plant, but perfect for the mushroom.
And wasn't there a really poetic description of how it grows, shedding its skin?
Ah, yes, that's incredibly evocative.
Yeah.
IX.86.44 describes Soma sloughing off its envelope, creeping out of his old skin like a serpent.
A serpent.
Think about how a mushroom emerges. The fly agaric starts in a white egg-like sac called the universal veil. As it grows, it breaks through this veil,
Leaving those white flecks on the red cap.
Precisely. The mushroom literally sheds its old skin, the veil, leaving remnants behind as those characteristic white spots on its fiery red surface. The Vedic poets observed this process and described it beautifully. The god shedding his skin.
Amazing. And one last visual detail. The night appearance. It's hurry, fiery red by day.
But one verse, IX.97.9, says that by night, Soma is silvery white.
How does that work?
Imagine seeing it in faint moonlight. The deep red color of the cap would fade into the darkness, wouldn't stand out much, but those bright white patches of veil.
These still catch the light. Looks silvery against the dark ground.
Exactly. It's another subtle, accurate observation. They knew this plant intimately, day and night.
Okay, let's try and pull all this together. It's quite a case Wasson built. We started with this huge mystery, 25 centuries old, and this fly agaric hypothesis seems to tick all the boxes based only on the oldest source, the Rig Veda.
Yeah, let's recap the key points. First, the negative evidence. No mention of leaves, roots, seeds, cultivating points away from a normal plant towards a fungus.
Second, the mandatory habitat. High mountains, tied to specific trees, which is exactly the ecological niche of Amanita muscaria in that region.
Third, the physical descriptions. The anu, or stalk, matching the stipe, the bull and udder metaphor fitting the shape, the hari color matching the red cap and yellow juice, the shedding skin matching the emergence from the veil.
And fourth, arguably the clincher, the unique chemistry, the only known psychoactive plant that works in two forms, the plant itself and its active urine metabolite.
Which perfectly explains the Vedas' reference to two forms and that incredibly specific, otherwise baffling verse about the swollen men pissing the flowing Soma, corroborated by the Avestan evidence.
So the fly agaric seems to be the only candidate that satisfies this whole very specific, very unusual set of constraints laid out in the Rig Veda. It's a pretty compelling solution to the botanical identity.
It really is a remarkable piece of historical and botanical detective work.
But it leaves us with maybe an even bigger question, doesn't it? If this was the central sacrament of the God plan itself, documented so clearly in their most sacred texts, why did it fall into disuse? Why was it replaced by substitutes that clearly didn't have the same effect?
That's the profound historical silence, isn't it? It seems like a deliberate veil was drawn over it. Wasson speculated about a few possibilities.
Like what?
Maybe the priests themselves decided to restrict the knowledge, maybe because the effects were too powerful, too unpredictable, or maybe the method of consumption, the urine part, became problematic or secret.
Or maybe it was simpler. Maybe the supply lines from those high mountains just broke down over time as society shifted.
That's also very possible. But there's a lingering sense, as Wasson noted, of something more deliberate, almost like a taboo. He even pointed to how the fly agaric seems almost cursed in later Northern European folklore, despite its striking appearance. Centuries of avoidance and silence far beyond India.
So we might have found the plant, the god of ecstasy, hidden in the texts. But the mystery that remains is why. Why did humanity, after worshiping it so intensely, seem to collectively decide to forget it? That silence, that forgetting, that's the provocative thought we'll leave you with today.